Good afternoon. A couple things to pick up on when Ken talked about build out and what build out would be. But every time a farm stays in business or we protect land, build out goes down. And really that's really important. 80% of the land was once farmed in Rhode Island. Most of the infrastructure development has occurred on farmland historically, to go back to the beginning of time. So when we are helping the rural, not necessarily the rural economy, but the agricultural economy of the state, the natural resources economy of the state, that is an incredibly important buffer against that future build out, that future water demand. So that's, if there's a take-home message for me, it's the importance of agriculture in the state, which is also creates impervious ground that water can infiltrate on. So agriculture sometimes is viewed as only as those turf, those guns, those irrigation guns that you see at the turf farms in the summertime. But in reality, maintaining an economy that is has agriculture as an important part of it is a really big part of the equation. Agriculture is changing very rapidly in the state. The local food movement has really put wind in the sails of farmers. It's grown rapidly over the past 5 to 6 years. Agriculture in Rhode Island for the past 10 to 20 was much dependent upon housing. That's what drove the green industry for the most part. That's our turf farms and our nurseries. A lot of things that we can't eat. And the dynamics are changing rapidly, and the sod farmers and the nursery industry are changing rapidly as well. And they have in their mindset what their industry can do to support the green infrastructure that several people talked about. Those plantscaping, those landscape designers are farmers and landscapers that are going to be gearing up to help the state deal with these type of stormwater issues. It's really where they are changing. So the rapid changes happening in agriculture. It's increasingly recognized as an important part of the state's economy. There are legal protections for farmers, which actually protect a lot of this, the Right to Farm Act, so that when a farmer is pumping his irrigation well and making noise, technically, as long as he's using good management practices, that's protected against nuisance complaints. One of the changes that the legislature made 20 years ago is they gave wetlands permitting to the Division of Agriculture so that we could be sensitive to their desires to build ponds, which was a friction point in terms of wetlands permitting. So we issue permits to farmers when they want to build a pond. It's coordinated within DEM and the standards are the same, but the bureaucratic steps are much different. Farmers, if they have an agricultural water management plan, are protected against cutbacks if the Water Resources Board orders it during a drought, for example. Water Resources Board itself has a very credible drought management plan, and there are various cost share programs that USDA does. I want to talk about quality a bit before I get into quantity. The Division of Agriculture has a role in looking for the relationship of agriculture to water quality issues, and we constantly probe and we'll do investigations, and we don't have the money and our staff to cover the entire state, but we'll look for particular issues and respond to them. In this case, these are streams on Aquidneck Island, which run by farms. We spent a year or two taking samples of those. We let the farmers know about what the results were, and they voluntarily changed some of their pesticide practices. As a result, completely voluntary, non-regulatory approach, but the farmers responded. We also, these are USGS wells, which we were given permission to use some time ago. You notice the backdrop was a sod field. So for a couple of years, we took samples from these wells, looked at the results, talked to the farmers, voluntarily worked with them on changing practices. We also do some sampling in the marine. One of my responsibilities is also to conduct the mosquito abatement program for the state. We give out larvicide to cities and towns. They put the larvicide in catch basins to control the mosquitoes that cause West Nile virus and Triple E. The lobster industry had a concern about that product getting out into the marine environment, possibly causing some of the increases in larval mortality. So we had staff who went out, took water quality measures at the outfalls of these catch basins. We didn't find anything, but out of deference to them, we switched the product that we reused because we had those concerns for their industry, and so we changed products and use something which is a naturally occurring bacterium called BT for mosquito control, henceforth. What we're going to do next is a partnership with URI Watershed Watch, which we're actually just starting today. Howard Cook, my pesticide supervisor, is in the back room. One of the things that was mentioned was the fact that there's a lot of issues with invasives. For example, at ponds throughout the state, we issue about 60 permits each year for people to put pesticides in ponds. That's again coordinated with DEM, and we're going to start to look for what's the fate of that product in those ponds. And so Watershed Watch is going to take samples for us. We're going to sample for about 90 active ingredients, and we're going to look for the fate of that product and just see what happens. So that's a database that we're going to start to build over time. Now, quantity. Agriculture has 4 sources of water. Rainfall. We do have a fair amount of rainfall in the state. Ponds, public water, and streams. Typically, the concerns in terms of the relationship between water quantity and the environment have to do with the latter two, public water, but most importantly, streams. Some watersheds in the state are stressed, others are not. Ken talked about this a little bit. The areas in brown are where the demand currently exceeds the withdrawal. Those are the stressed watersheds. They tend to be situated, for the most part, in the southern part of the state. This is where we tend to focus on in terms of the relationship between agriculture and those stressed watersheds, and where if we tend to do work, we would do it in these areas. And one of those that's a watershed in that area is the Chappaqua, which we in particular are starting to focus in on. That is where a lot of the sod farms are, and they are a source of demand in the summertime. What it comes down to is that, as Ken just said, when the demand is greatest, the supply is lowest, and that happens in the summer. And so that's what we deal with. If you look at agriculture as a total, I think they use 2% of the water in the state, but the problem is when they use it. And that's essentially the issue. Worst case scenarios perhaps are some stream cases which are streams which are entirely over allocated, and this is one in Massachusetts where I think he got out of the canoe before it dried up, but which is basically over allocated and dries up on average about every other year. So that's the worst case scenario. That's obviously something that we want to avoid, and managing to avoid that is part of what we all have the mission to try and accomplish respectively. But this is the Hunt River in the summer of 2005, one of the drier years. Some of the wetlands near the river showing the impact of not just demands upon the system, but the dry weather that year. So we've studied the issue. USGS has done work in concert with DEM, and NRCS produced this report about 10 years ago. That's something of a baseline for us going forward in terms of trying to manage the system, look at the effects of agriculture and other sources of demand. We work very, very closely with the NRCS. If you want to understand how the Farm Bill works in Rhode Island, this is who it works through. Very important agency, and DEM is a very strong cooperative agreement with them, a relationship with them to help out farmers in particular. These are some of the programs that we work under, the EQIP program, which you might be familiar with, and AMS program. But basically, the way it works is the NRCS provides money for certain practices to happen on a farm. These are the list of some of the practices. It might be a buried irrigation system. It might be lining the bottom of a pond, and they achieve certain environmental benefits. And the goal here is to achieve efficiencies of use, and this is some of the efficiencies that happen with those particular practices. Visually, this is an example of a probe which goes beneath the soil by which you can monitor the soil moisture content of the ground. This is a drip irrigation system where the goal is to basically put the water at the base of the plant, instead of an overhead spray where you lose water to evapotranspiration. Drip irrigation meters the water out slowly, and it infiltrates and is used very efficiently. This is where a covering goes over a plant row to avoid evaporation losses. This is a center pivot system on a farm, and the key here is the drop nozzles, which I don't know if you can see or not, but the drop nozzles are located just above the ground. So the water has a very short travel between the time it goes out of the nozzle and hits the ground. So you're not losing it to wind, you're not losing it to transpiration. These are all practices that NRCS pays for. And simply burying an irrigation line creates efficiencies, because typically when farmers move irrigation lines around, they're linked, and at every linkage you have a water loss. So putting it below ground, cementing those linkages together and making it permanent means that water is going to travel from its source to the crop without being lost en route. And this is an example of, it's a bad picture here, but drop nozzles in place in a center pivot system, which was a replacement of the gun, which just throws water out into the air, subject to wind, evaporative losses, and is a much more efficient system. This type of work occurs constantly. This is how DM and NRCS go at work. We often deal with the permitting side of that, or the regulatory side, and NRCS deals with the funding side of it and the technical assistance side. In terms of wells and streams, obviously when a farmer takes water directly out of the stream, that's the most direct and negative impact. The goal is, first of all, to have him take water out of a pond, if we can, to create an off-site pond, or to put it in a well. The farther the distance that well is from the stream, the better it is for the environment, because it delays the impact on the stream. There will be an impact on the stream eventually, but moving it away can delay that impact by months. And it could also change the time when that impact is, from perhaps summertime to another period of time. That's the strategy we take with agriculture. And this is an example of a recent success story, which this is URI, their Peckham farm, which is leased out to a sod farmer. Historically, the farmer has taken water directly out of the Chepuxet River. Right where West Kingston School is, there's actually a pipe that runs underneath the road from the Chepuxet to the field. And we did two things. We told him he could clean out his pond, the farmer, which is an exemption under the Wetlands Act for agriculture. So he deepened and widened the pond, which was on site. And then DEM worked with him and URI, which pushed this as well, to put a well in distance from the stream. So just a few minutes ago, actually, he took his withdrawal point out of the Chepuxet and is irrigating off the pond and the well. So that's the type of thing that we try and achieve, to take that direct impact away from the stream. It's better for the environment, still achieve the same amount of water volume for the farmer, but it lessens the impact on the stream. And essentially, this is NRCS guiding principles, but we endorse them. We try and work with farmers. We try and do so in a non-regulatory, voluntary manner. But if regulation is needed, we can go there, but the farmers are receptive, and we find that over the past 10 to 15 years, a lot of improvements have been made. So that, in a sense, is how we are working with agriculture in the state. And any questions?